We spoke of a hadith where we found that she was 6 years old and her mother had brought her into the house so that she could hear her father offer her hand in marriage to his best friend, which happened to be the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him. But she tells us that she went back outside because it didn't happen. Let's look in the Quran and see what we find about this. Chapter 4, now we're talking about An-Nisa. Chapter An-Nisa, chapter 4 of the Quran is dealing with the women. Look at verse number 19. If you have a translation, if you don't have, go to our website and get one. They're free, download, put it in your computer. Verse 19 says, the believers, O you who believe, you cannot inherit women against their will. As we discussed in previous programs, it was a practice of the ignorant pagans, the mushrikeen of the Arabian Peninsula, that they would try to inherit the children's wealth. And what they would do, let's say for instance that some parents die, and here's a 6-month-old girl or a 18-month-old girl, a baby, he can say, that's my wife, and just claim her as a wife to do what? To take her wealth away. So now it comes that no, you can't do that. If you look in the first part of this chapter, you'll find that that's exactly what it's talking about in dealing with the wealth of these little girls, that you're not permitted to marry these little girls to steal their wealth or mingle it with your money. And when the subject of marriage comes up, marry other women. But we're not on that subject tonight. We already talked about that. But this particular verse here in verse 19 is saying you can't inherit these women against their will. You're not allowed to get married to these girls until they're old enough to make a choice, and they're not old enough to make a choice until what? Until they are old enough to have a baby. Now, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the example for us throughout the rest of history till the last day to see how to deal in these particular instances so that we can give these rights and stay within these limitations. Here's a girl. Let's say that she's an orphan. Can I marry her? Well, is she mature enough to have a baby? No? Then no, you can't marry her. Because there's nobody here to sign for her to say that, okay, this is my daughter, you can have her. She has nobody. So it has to be that her parents are there or somebody responsible for her, and she has to be old enough to do what? To have a baby. And that is why when Aisha was only 6 years old, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, obviously did not accept these terms because the girl isn't old enough. Not that he didn't want to be married to the daughter of his very best friend, his lifelong companion, which was Abu Bakr. That was not the reason. Because in those days, if you would reject a marriage offer, or if you turned down an offer that was being made in marriage for somebody in your family, it could cause a big tribal scene, a big problem. But here is Muhammad, who is not marrying, peace be upon him, not marrying the daughter of his best friend. And there's only one reason why. Because it wouldn't be considered right in Islam. She's not old enough. Because keep reading, you find another hadith in Sahih Bukhari, another story, and it's clearly stating now she's older. Several years have gone by, and the similar situation takes place. And they bring her into the house, and now she is old enough to have babies. She has started her menstrual cycle, and now the example for us comes that, yes, as soon as they're old enough to really be a mother, to have a baby, that's the earliest they can be married. And it was offered again, and it was accepted by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. But watch this. She, again, talking about Aisha radiallahu anha, may Allah accept from her, tells us that they were married. Married. Focus on this word marriage, because that's what they had, a marriage. And she says that when they were married, they played together. They had fun. They romped together. They chased each other. They had races. She talks about this herself, and he, peace be upon him, talks about it to his companions to mention that if you have a chance to marry a virgin girl, then raise her up and have fun with her and play with her. The emphasis was on what? To have a companionship in developing this love between each other. She's the one who talks about sex in other hadiths. And she narrates over about 2,200, roughly, authentic hadiths or stories coming from her. Many of them dealing with the relationship of a man and a woman. And yes, she talks about sex in the most beautiful and sweet way. A way that if you read it, you say, oh my God, isn't this nice? Talking about how a man is to be intimate with his wife, being close to her and coaxing her and just not being rude, not being crude, not just going to her like an animal, no. Going to her in the most beautiful way. Now, watch this. She is considered to us today to be one of the top scholars of Islam, especially in the areas of a woman. She was married to Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, until he passed away. And he passed away in her arms with his head in her lap. And she had so much love for her husband. Do you know that she never, ever, ever spoke bad about him? She never uttered a word in all of these hadiths or stories that would even disparage her husband even the least little bit. And do you know that she never even considered being married to another man? Think about this. In fact, her honor and her dignity with this respect is defended by Allah. Allah defends her in the Quran in chapter 24, Surah An-Nur, in the most beloved way to show that this is a woman who is beyond reproach when it comes to the subject on this sex. So much dignity, so much respect is here for her. And look at this. She lived into her 70s, always speaking the very best way about her husband. And I ask you to be honest. Do you know any woman that could do that today? Even go 70 days without saying bad against her. How about 70 minutes? How about 7 minutes that a woman doesn't say something against her own husband? This has become a topic of a joke in the situation comedies called sitcoms. This is the way they act in television all the time, making jokes about the husband, making jokes about the family, cutting down the husband, and making fun of him. And this lady, this highly respected mother of the believers, as she's called, never said anything like this, or even indicated it was permissible to talk like this. In fact, I'd like to share something with you, and I'd like you to think about this real deep. There's a famous love story in the English language. It's considered a classical love story called Romeo and Juliet. It's written by Shakespeare. Even Muslims, by the way, know this story very well. It's a story of two young lovers who love each other so much, but their tribes were feuding against each other in such a horrible way that it was not even considered a possibility that they should even talk to each other, much less ever get married. These two young teenagers, like 12 or 13 years old, by the way, approximately the age of Aisha when she's getting married. Here they are, lovers, not married. They can't be together, so they're so distraught. One of them takes poison and the other kills themselves. Double suicide. And that's considered a love story. I'd like you to do something, and I want you to think about what I'm going to offer you right now. I would like you to take the stories of Aisha and Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, and remove from these stories, these hadiths, the teachings of the Quran, remove anything which has to do with time, date, place, or names. So nobody will be able to identify except the story itself. Then I want you to take that story, this beautiful story, this relationship, take that to any psychiatrist that you know. Take it to any sociologist. Take it to any marriage counselor. Take it to any social worker. And let them read the story. And then ask them, what do you think about this story? The story of a relationship between this man and this woman. They're playing together, they're having fun together. She said we used to race, and he would chase, and I would beat him. But then I got older and I got heavier, and then he would beat me. She used to talk about the relationship in such a sweet way that there could be no mistake of this great grand affection that they had. So much so that even when he was dying, he wanted to be in her arms. And what do you think they're going to say when they read this story? I venture to guess they're going to tell you, this is the story that Shakespeare meant to write, to have a real beautiful love story where not only do they live here happily ever after. But when they die and go to Jannah and live happily ever after there. That's the real story. You're talking about a love story that's the best love story that this earth has ever seen between a man